Ever feel like someone's handed you this map for life and they're like, this is it, bud. No detours, no off-roading, just follow the dotted line.
And you're stuck with this lousy GPS voice telling you where to turn.
Ugh, the worst. But that's kind of what we're diving into today, this idea that you have to stick to this one predetermined path, especially when it comes to education.
And we're not just talking theory here, Ray. This is playing out in the real world, impacting actual students. This paper we're looking at, it centers on one student's experience. They call her Rihanna.
So Rihanna, she seems like one of those go-getter types. She's got this passion for working with kids, especially neurodiverse kids.
Yeah.
Wants to go into special education.
Admirable, for sure. But then she hits a wall.
A big one. See, she's studying at this university in the Philippines. We'll call it PU to keep things simple. And PUU, they have this thing, this obsession with what they call vertically aligned degrees.
Which, if you hear it out of context, doesn't sound that crazy.
Right, like you want your classes to kind of flow together, build on each other.
Sure, like you wouldn't expect to go straight from finger painting with kindergartners to, like, sculpting the next David. Right.
Exactly. You got to learn your shapes before you can tackle Michelangelo.
Right. But here's where the whole vertically aligned thing goes off the rails at PUU.
Off the rails, into the ditch, the whole shebang. They've basically turned it into this unwritten rule that your master's degree has to be in the exact same field as your bachelor's.
No exceptions.
So Rihanna, our aspiring special ed teacher, she's got this drive, this clear purpose, but because she got her bachelor's in English.
Door slammed shut. Linguistics or bust, kid.
It's like they looked at her passion and said, cute, but rules are rules. And the author of this paper, Louis Jouret, he does not hold back. Calls it straight up bullshit.
No mincing words there.
Not at all. But he's not just trying to be provocative, right? He's using bullshit in that philosophical sense, like Harry Frankfurt talked about.
Right. It's deeper than just a curse word here.
Yeah.
He's saying this policy isn't just bad. It's like these administrators, they're not even trying to see if it holds water, if it helps students.
It's like they're saying, we made this rule, therefore it's good.
Case closed, end of discussion. Which, let's be honest, is kind of ironic, right? That the whole point of university is supposed to be encouraging critical thinking, questioning assumptions.
You'd think so. But in this case, it's more like fall in line or find the exit.
Don't rock the boat. And Jouret points out that this whole dynamic, it's even more complicated when you factor in the cultural context of the Philippines.
Oh, right. Because in some cultures, questioning authority, even respectfully, it's not really looked upon kindly.
Exactly. So you've got a system that's already set up to discourage dissent. Then you layer on this cultural expectation of respecting authority.
Students are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what makes this whole academic freedom thing so infuriating.
Right. The university, they brag about valuing academic freedom, but how can you even claim that when you're essentially backing students into a corner with their degree choices?
It's like saying, you have all the freedom in the world to do exactly what we tell you.
Which is not freedom at all, really, is it?
Not even close. And what makes it even more ridiculous is that this whole vertically aligned degree thing, it's not even an official policy.
Wait, seriously? So it's like this phantom rule that everyone's terrified of, but nobody can actually point to it in writing?
It's all done through these whispers in the hallway, these nods and winks, from administrators to department heads.
So it's like this shadowy, you know what I mean, kind of rule.
Exactly. Which makes it even harder to fight, right? Because how do you challenge something that doesn't technically exist?
You're fighting a ghost.
Right. And Jouret calls this out for what it is. He calls it a false dilemma.
Which, let's be honest, is a tactic we've all encountered at some point in our lives. It's that manipulative either-or choice designed to make you feel like you only have one option.
Exactly. And in this case, the choice is study what we tell you to study.
Or sayonara. And it's not a real choice, is it? What if you're like strapped for cash, can't afford to transfer schools, or, maybe you don't want to uproot your whole life?
Right. It's not exactly a level playing field. And Jouret, he's not just calling out this one university or even just higher ed in general. He's getting at something much bigger here.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
It's this whole idea of autonomy, right?
Right.
Like, it's not enough to just have choices. We have to actually feel empowered to make those choices. For real. Without someone breathing down our necks.
You're speaking my language. It's like that feeling when, I don't know, you're trying to pick a restaurant with a friend, and they keep suggesting places, but you can tell they're secretly judging your every suggestion.
The worst. You're not actually free to choose if you feel like you have to please someone else, right?
Exactly. And GUI actually uses this really powerful term. He calls it academic coercion.
Yeah, sounds a little dramatic, but it
Yeah.
really captures that power dynamic, that sense of being pressured into a certain direction.
These students, they're not just choosing a major, they're being nudged or maybe even shoved towards a future that might not even align with what they want.
And when you're young, figuring things out, that kind of pressure can be really, really stifling.
It's giving me flashbacks to that scene in Divergent, remember? Where they do that aptitude test and everyone's freaking out about which faction they'll end up
Oh,
in.
totally. Super intense, right?
Yeah, it's a fictional world, but this whole PUU situation is kind of giving off those same
Like
vibes.
you're being sorted into a box, whether you fit or not. And what's even more concerning, right? It's this assumption that specialization is the only path to success.
Right, like pick your lane and stay in it, or else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Our world is messy. It's complex. We need people who can think outside those neat little boxes.
Yes. And Gites actually makes this case for generalists, which I love.
He's saying we need people who can bridge disciplines, connect the dots, see the bigger picture.
Because, let's be real, the most interesting stuff, it rarely fits into just one category.
Right. Absolutely. Think about someone like, oh, Margaret Wheatley.
Okay, yeah. She's huge in the world of leadership and organizational development, but her background.
Talk about all over the map. Political science, literature, even a doctorate in educational administration. Not exactly a straight line.
But look at the impact she's made.
Exactly. Or how about Dan O'Reilly, the behavioral economist?
Love his work. But wait, his PhD is in.
Cognitive psychology.
Right.
Which makes sense when you think about it. All those insights into decision-making, the hidden biases we have.
It's like he took a detour from the traditional econ path and ended up making these incredible discoveries about human behavior.
And this is what happens when you venture outside your designated lane, right?
Mhm.
You stumble upon these unexpected connections, these aha moments.
Okay, but you know what's my favorite example from the paper? It's Shaq.
Wait, the Shaq, as in Shaquille O'Neal,
Yeah.
the basketball legend.
The one and only. The big Aristotle himself has a doctorate in education.
Okay, you got me there. That's amazing. Talk about a nonlinear path.
Right. But it proves that you can't always predict where someone's passion will take them. And that's where this whole idea of multi-potentiality comes in. It's that capacity to excel in multiple areas, even if they seem totally unrelated on the surface.
Like your brain is this multifaceted, multi-talented thing.
Right.
But this PUU policy, it's like they want to take a steamroller to all that potential, flatten it out, make everyone fit into this predetermined mold.
Which is such a disservice because when you force someone down a path that doesn't resonate, it shows, right?
Totally. Their work, it lacks that spark, that passion. It becomes about checking boxes, not pursuing passions.
And that's a recipe for, well, a pretty uninspired life.
And a less interesting world for the rest of us.
Yeah, when you put it like that, dehumanization, it's a heavy word, right? But it starts to make sense because if you're constantly being told your interests don't matter, your passions don't fit the mold, it's going to mess with your head, right?
Like being told you're not allowed to be yourself, that who you are is somehow wrong or not good enough. And to experience that in a university setting, a place that's supposed to be about exploration and growth, it's especially messed up.
It's like that's where you're supposed to figure out who you are, what you're good at, what lights you up. And Jaray doesn't stop there. He takes it a step further. He argues that this kind of system, this rigidity, it doesn't just impact individual students, it actually undermines the whole idea of a democratic society.
Which, on the surface, might seem like a bit of a leap, right?
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, it makes sense. Democracy thrives on participation, on people feeling empowered to speak up, to question things, to shape the systems that govern their lives. But what does this policy tell students?
Basically, sit down, shut up, and color inside the lines.
Exactly. It creates this culture of silence, of unquestioning obedience. And that's the opposite of what we need in a healthy democracy, right? We need people who can think for themselves, who can challenge the status quo, who can imagine alternative ways of doing things.
Yes. It reminds me of something John Dewey said, something like, democracy has to be born anew every generation, and education is its midwife.
Love that quote. And Gire actually brings in some other heavy hitters to back this up, like John Stuart Mill, who really understood the link between individual freedom and a thriving society. But here's the other thing that really gets me about this whole situation. It's not just about democracy, it's about creativity, it's about innovation.
Because when you force everyone into these narrow lanes, you miss out on all the amazing stuff that happens when people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, collide.
Exactly. Gire calls it consilience, this idea that knowledge from different fields can come together to create something truly groundbreaking.
It's like, imagine if Da Vinci had been told, okay, buddy, you can either be a painter or an inventor, pick one and stick to it. We might not have the Mona Lisa or his incredible flying machines.
Right. Talk about a loss for humanity. And this actually highlights the absurdity of the whole thing, because the Philippine Qualifications Framework, which is supposed to be this guiding document for higher ed in the Philippines, it actually encourages multidisciplinary learning.
So it's like this policy is totally out of step, not just with common sense, but with the stated goals of the educational system itself.
It's a head-scratcher for sure, but for me, what really hits home is this idea that by forcing conformity, you're not just limiting career options, you're actually stifling something much deeper: authenticity.
You're basically saying, don't be yourself, be what we tell you to be.
And that's a recipe for a lot of unhappy, unfulfilled people, and a less interesting, less vibrant world for all of us.
Because when we embrace our unique passions, our weird quirks, our multiple interests, that's when the magic happens. That's when we get those groundbreaking discoveries, those world-changing innovations, those beautiful works of art that make life worth living.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, if there's one thing we want you to take away from this deep dive, it's this: don't be afraid to question the rules, especially when those rules are holding you back from pursuing your passions, from exploring your full potential, from being your most authentic self. Because the world needs what you have to offer, all of it, not just the parts that fit neatly into some predetermined box.
Boom, mic drop.